On May 14th, American rideshare company Uber held its Go Get 2025 event, a yearly event where Uber releases its biggest products. Last year's event saw the introduction of Uber One for students and scheduled UberX rides, among more. But this year, Uber Chief Product Officer Sachin Kansal took to the stage in Manhattan to showcase Uber's newest product, RouteShare. According to Uber, RouteShare offers budget-friendly rides along a fixed route, with consistent and frequent pickup options along busy corridors during commute hours in big cities. The product is expected to initially launch in cities across the country, including New York, San Francisco, Chicago, and Dallas, among more. Let's go through that again. RouteShare offers budget-friendly rides along a fixed route with fixed pickups every 20 minutes, particularly along busy corridors in cities. Fixed route. Fixed pickups every 20 minutes. Busy corridors. Budget-friendly. Sound like a bus to anyone? Welcome back to D-Transit. Before we continue, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. On May 14th, Uber unveiled its new RouteShare product, a huge expansion for the request-based rideshare company. But many, particularly on social media, were quick to point out that Uber literally just reinvented a bus. Today we'll look at the logic behind Uber's decision and whether it might work in some places. Uber's RouteShare is marketed as a budget-friendly way to get where you need to go in busy cities, particularly during commuting hours. The idea is that you open the Uber app and enter a pickup and drop-off. The app then finds the closest RouteShare locations to your origin and destination, and books you a ride in the vehicle alongside two other passengers. Along the way to your destination, the vehicle could make other stops to pick up and let off the other passengers. You can pre-book spots on the vehicles, which run every 20 minutes along these designated routes during commute rush hours, basically like booking a spot on an Amtrak train. Because RouteShare wouldn't pick you up or drop you off at your exact location, this also means that the price is lower, almost 50% of the price you might find for an UberX. Let's take an example. Let's say I want to go from 8th Avenue and 53rd Street to 23rd Street and 3rd Avenue in Manhattan. If we put this into Google Maps, we are instantly suggested a public transit route, either the E across to Lexington Avenue and then a bus down 3rd Avenue, or a 5-minute walk to the Q train at 57th Street and 7th Ave, getting off at 23rd Street before walking another 10 minutes. Both options would take about 25 minutes, give or take a few, and would cost you the flat fare that New York charges to get anywhere in the city, $2.90. Now, let's open the Uber app and see the rideshare option. For reference, I'm doing this on the Uber app at 8 p.m. on a Sunday. Since RouteShare only operates on weekdays, I'll schedule the pickup for 6:13 a.m. on Monday morning. The app shows a price of $42 for an UberX, almost 14 times that of the subway fare. Instead of booking an UberX though, I'll back out and go to the search options without a scheduled time. I'll scroll down the list and select RouteShare. Notice how it says that the next one is on Monday at 6:13 a.m. RouteShare only operates during rush hours on weekdays. I'll click the option to book the next ride, which starts at 6:13 a.m. on Monday. As you can see, I'd have to take a 7-minute walk just to get to the pickup point at 51st and 7th, then ride in the Uber for an estimated 11 minutes before walking another 10 minutes to my destination at 23rd and 3rd from 27th and 2nd, coming to a total of 28 minutes. I can even click See All, which displays the full list of departures between the two locations. As Uber claimed, the rides do in fact come every 20 minutes during rush hour. But for two trips that take roughly the same amount of time, there's a huge cost disparity between the two. Uber's RouteShare would come to a total of $16.40, while the fare for New York City Transit is almost $14 less at $2.90, which highlights one of RouteShare's biggest shortfalls: pricing. Let's take it back a notch quickly. RouteShare's main goal is to create a consistent, direct route that takes people from one set location to another set location within 20-minute intervals. In most cases, it is exactly like a bus. It runs a direct route and picks and drops people off, but with a far lower capacity, as the vehicles will just be the usual Uber vehicles, so sedans and SUVs. The main target for RouteShare is for people who can't handle the increase of Uber's surge charges, the increased charges that Uber charges during peak periods in hotspots like cities. This just means that passengers will have to walk to and from their origin and destination to meet the vehicle. Does this even differ from a bus? Will it put buses out of business? Will it work? The hierarchy of transit modes often depicts buses as one of the closest modes to walking and cycling. Because it uses roads, it doesn't have a fixed route that requires lots of infrastructure, and bus stops are easy to modify. It can get you far closer to a destination than a rail-based vehicle might. However, buses are also susceptible to traffic, gridlocks, and constant start-stops, which add to trip times. Buses are often used as a solution to last-mile transit issues. The last-mile transit issue refers to the final leg between a transit stop and their final destination, often the most challenging hurdle to increasing ridership on transit. Just take a look at Caltrain on San Francisco's peninsula. The line is incredibly quick, efficient, and a very pleasant ride, but the distance between stations and office hotspots is often more than 1 to 2 miles, which means that people tend to cut their losses and drive entirely instead of taking Caltrain at all. Now, I think Uber's route share will be pretty hit or miss in most areas. If we go back to the Manhattan example earlier in the video, the trip times are almost identical, but there's a huge disparity in cost. New York has one of America's most established and widespread subway systems, and an even more extensive bus system that covers most areas of all 5 boroughs. Even in the transit deserts that exist on the eastern side of Manhattan, or the space between the cores of Brooklyn and Queens, the MTA has been at work redesigning the extensive bus systems to make sure that they make up the ground that the subway system loses. They're able to provide a pretty extensive service in the form of express and local buses. New York City is also one of, if not the most, walkable city in the United States, particularly in its core in Manhattan. But New York's case is a pretty unique one when it comes to the United States as a whole. Most cities are not nearly as walkable as New York, and most subway systems do not have the reach, frequency, accessibility, or affordability that the New York City subway offers. Now, this idea might still work for cities like Chicago or Philadelphia, but the conversation completely shifts when we start to look at the other cities in the list. For example, Baltimore and Dallas. In cities like Baltimore and Dallas, which are so much more car dependent and lack the far-reaching public transit that a big city should have, route share could prove vital in eliminating private vehicles on the road. Aside from the minimal light rail network that DART has in Dallas, and the one light rail and one subway line that Baltimore has, there really isn't much in terms of public transit infrastructure. Route share could step up here, building corridors to move people where buses and trains lack the service and capacity. Yes, it will be far more expensive than what public transit would be, but ultimately, it'll provide a vital transit option to people who might not be able to use a private vehicle. Granted, if you can't or don't want to operate a private vehicle, then choosing Dallas as your city might not be the best move. At face value, Uber's route share seems like a pretty ridiculous concept. They're taking the concept of buses, but without the added benefits of low cost and downsizing to just 2 to 3 people per car. In cities like New York or San Francisco or Philadelphia or Chicago, where walkability scores higher than on a national average and there's a pretty functional public transit system, it seems like a ridiculous concept that won't be affordable by the working people. But in cities like Baltimore or Miami or Dallas, where there is a consistent lack of functional public transit with good frequency and high car dependency, route share could be the difference between people choosing to drive themselves or people choosing a route share option to connect themselves to other transit or to their destination. And that's where Uber might be able to step in big time. It would be much more ideal if Uber was able to request larger vehicles for its route share routes. That would make it much more like microtransit. Either way, because of its flexibility, route share will undoubtedly fill in the gaps that transit agencies have missed for years on end, and will likely be a perfect, cheaper option for those who need to get somewhere but can't use their own car. Ultimately, the single biggest thing that needs to happen here is that public transit agencies should use Uber's route shares to determine what they're missing. Of course, some of the smaller agencies might not be able to cover everything. It'll be interesting to see how the success of route share plays out, particularly the differences in performance in a city like New York compared to one like Dallas. I'm not saying that it won't get usage outright in a city like New York. There are absolutely transit deserts in areas of the city, and these route share routes will likely differ from what buses offer. But when a city has such an exemplary transit system for such an incredibly low cost, it does feel like a scam to go with an Uber route share in this scenario. In those other cities, though, I think it'll prove really successful, especially in the ones without public transit and with high car dependency. The most important thing should be for transit agencies to pick up the hints of what Uber is showing, that more transit is needed in these densely populated areas. Since route share operates in direct corridors, transit agencies should look at route share as an opportunity to improve frequencies and service range. While they might not be able to cover the entire city in bus lines, route share could expose any big flaws or gaps in their network. Because at the end of the day, transit like this should be far more financially equitable to a common person than route share will be. Of course, you are paying for the experience of being in a car with just one or two other people. But if this is the only public option available to someone other than driving their own car, then $15 for a 15-minute ride is frankly ridiculous. Thanks for watching this D-Transit video. If you enjoyed it and want to see more content like this, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Comment your thoughts below on the Uber route share program. Do you think Uber just reinvented the bus? Or could route share actually fix a gap in cities like Dallas or Miami? Thanks again for watching, have a fantastic day, and I'll see you all later.